Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome back to this episode of From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. So today's topic, I loved reading your blog post about this because so many of these people that we're going to be talking about, I knew their faces, once again, but did not know all their history. And
good.
So,
W.C. Field famously said, what did he say? Never work with children or animals. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about those famous child stars of the golden era. And there's just so many great kids to talk about. Of course, you've got your Mickey Rooneys and your Shirley Temples and your Judy Garlands.
And Natalie Wood.
Natalie Woods and Roddy McDowell and Elizabeth Taylor. We're not talking about them.
But there's still people that you will have seen in many, many films.
You'll know all of their faces. You may not know their names, but we're talking about, as we tend to do, some of the lesser-known child actors of the era. And the first one we're going to start out with is one of my favorites, Virginia Weidler.
All right, she is one of my favorites too. And one of the reasons is that she is not precocious as a young actor.
That's what I love about her.
I love her. Let's talk about, how did she get started?
She got started at the tender age of 3.
Wow.
So I think she had a stage mother who got her involved. But she was from Los Angeles. I think she grew up in the business. At 3 years old, she's in her first movie, which is a 1931 dramatic film called Surrender, which starred Warner Baxter. And that led her to an important role in a movie called, and I love this title, Mrs. Wiggs of the Cabbage Patch.
I love that title. 1934.
It was a 1934 comedy, but incidentally, it also starred W.C. Fields.
Oh my gosh, I wonder what he would say.
So maybe this is why he said never work with children.
Because of Virginia.
Maybe Virginia spoiled it for everybody. This really got her started, and her next role was a very important film for her. It was called Freckles in 1935, and she was the lead, so she had to carry the entire film on her shoulders, and she proved she could.
That's amazing.
So then once you prove that you can carry a film, I mean, that's it. They rushed her into so many movies, and this was all at Paramount because her first contract was with Paramount. But in 1938, Paramount didn't renew her contract. Well, MGM, they were smart and they picked her up. And that's when she really came into her own. They started her out easy. They put her in one of the Andy Hardy movies, Out West with the Hardys, in 1938, with, of course, Mickey Rooney and Louis Stone and the gang. And she did well with that. But then she really hit her stride for MGM when she did the 1939 classic film, The Women.
And what a role that she has in that film at such a young age.
Yes. I mean, she really had to go toe-to-toe with Norma Shearer and Joan Crawford.
I wouldn't want to be on that set.
Exactly. Rosalind Russell.
Those are some tough ladies.
She did. She held her own. And she's so, like you said, she's so not precocious. She's just so matter-of-fact, and she's almost businesslike in the way she deals with her mother about the divorce and the women. She's just fantastic. Well, they continued to keep her busy. They gave her plum parts in great movies like The Young Tom Edison with Mickey Rooney in 1940, and All This in Heaven 2 in 1940 with Betty Davis and Charles Boyer. But the next big movie to me, and it's also, she's so fantastic, and she plays the little sister Dinah of Katharine Hepburn's character in The Philadelphia Story in 1940.
And you know, we touched on that film briefly about the play being written for Katharine Hepburn.
Right.
And how it is an iconic role for Katharine Hepburn. But I really think of Dinah and Virginia Weidler. I can't think of anybody else in the role of Dinah.
I know. Could you imagine?
No, she's wonderful.
And you know, there's one scene in particular where Dinah first meets James Stewart and Ruth Hussey, and she comes in and she sings this bawdy song called Lydia the Tattooed Lady on the piano.
They're trying to convince them that we're just normal people here. We're not rich.
Exactly. And then she comes out with this. It is hilarious.
In fact, we have a little clip of that song, Virginia Weidler singing
Lydia the Tattooed Lady. You're going to love it.
Can you play the piano? I can, and sing at the same time. Listen. Lydia, oh Lydia, say have you met Lydia? Oh Lydia, the tattooed lady. She has eyes that folks adore, so and the torso even more. So Lydia,
what is this?
Lydia, that encyclopedia.
Lydia,
Lydia, the queen of tattoo. On her back is the Battle of Waterloo. Beside it, the wreck of the Hesperus too. And
She's amazing.
How about that for trying to prove that you're a normal family?
Yes.
After that, though, she started to get into that awkward teen age.
Yeah.
And, her career kind of slowed down a little bit. Her final film performance was actually in a Lucille Ball vehicle called Best Foot Forward in 1943. So she had a limited run because, as most child actors, they age out. And a lot of people just did not make the transition into adulthood. And she didn't. She married very young. She married at age 20 to a naval officer. She had 2 sons. She went on to a pretty normal, quiet life. And interestingly enough, she wouldn't really talk about her life as a child star.
I read that. I read that she never gave interviews. She never spoke about her film career, and she never watched her movies.
Yeah, never. Which is funny that you can just cut that part of your life out. It makes you wonder what happened.
Yeah. Or did she really recognize the value of other things in life, family and
maybe so.
Love?
A sad part to her story is that she actually died young. She died at the age of 41 of a heart attack after she had some health issues, which is, too bad. So, but she just gave us such a treasure trove of wonderful performances over the years.
She really did. Yeah. She really did. Who's our next young lad?
Oh, our next young lad we're going to talk about is that little blonde towhead of Jackie Jenkins. They called Butch Jenkins.
He is the most adorable. I mean, could you get any more classic in terms of his hair, his little tuft of hair, his freckles, and his little gap in the center of his teeth?
He was known for his little gap between his teeth, but he was wonderful. And he was kind of discovered like Lana Turner was. They say that Lana Turner was discovered.
Schwab's, yeah.
He was playing on the beach, and he was discovered. He had a stage mother, though, who was a former actress. I'm sure she probably shoved the kid in. She heard there was producers around and shoved the kid in front of him. But he was discovered just playing on the beach like a normal kid.
And he, again, another young actor who worked with amazing directors throughout his career.
Absolutely. He really did. And some of the actors he worked with, great.
Oh, yeah.
His screen debut, he played the younger brother of Mickey Rooney in the Americana film of all times, The Human Comedy.
1942.
Which I love this movie so much. And it's really about the effects of war on this kind of quiet California town. And he starred with Frank Morgan and James Craig and Marcia Hunt and Donna Reed and Van Johnson and Faye Bainter and Ray Collins and just some incredible people. But he really is so memorable as that little boy.
Yeah. And then he follows that up with, National Velvet.
Yes. He played Elizabeth Taylor's little brother and so memorable in that. I mean, he was just he had this authenticity about him that just made you want to just eat him up with a spoon.
Yeah, you had in your blog, too, that critic Pauline Kael wrote about his performance in The Human Comedy and in National Velvet, that he's the little brother of everyone's dreams.
Doesn't that sum it up?
I just love. That's a perfect encapsulation of him.
It does. And another really great movie he's in, and it's one of my favorite movies, is Our Vines Have Tender Grapes from 1944, which is just wonderful, nostalgic family film with Edward G. Robinson and fellow child star Margaret O'Brien.
Oh.
And he plays the friend of Margaret O'Brien. And there's one sequence where they get into this metal bathtub and they end up getting into this river rapid scene that it's so heart-thumping to think these kids are going to...
Are they going to die? Are they going to...
Exactly. And the whole town comes out to save them, and it just shows you the beauty of community, and it's a great moment in the film. But he's just incredible. He continues to grow. He's starting to get top billing in movies.
And at the tender age of like 10 or 9 or something.
A little star at this age. He's in Little Mr. Jim in 1946, which is a comedy drama about this boy dealing with the death of his mom, which is directed by Fred Zinnemann. You mentioned the great directors he worked with. This is certainly one of them.
Right.
And of course, Fred Zinnemann later won the Best Director Oscar for From Here to Eternity in 1953. Well, also Jenkins did a movie called Boys Ranch, which was inspired by a real-life ranch in Texas, which provided a home and education to underprivileged kids. And MGM promoted the film sort of as a successor to Boys Town.
Okay.
Which makes sense. If it works once, do it again.
Right. 'Twas ever thus in Hollywood.
Exactly. Fred Zinnemann loved Butch Jenkins and actually cast him again in a really cool movie called My Brother Talks to Horses. And I've seen this movie It's so funny.
I love
it's
the
such
title.
a wicked setup for a narrative. It's a comedy about this kid, this little boy, who becomes an unwitting bookie because he can hear the thoughts of racehorses.
I love that racehorses have thoughts.
Exactly.
It's just a great premise.
And he can hear who's in a bad mood, who's not feeling well. So
Like, this is the winner.
He can pick the horse that's going to win, which is genius. And it's a really funny
cute.
movie. After that, he's cast as Mickey Rooney's little brother, which is really genius casting if you think about it.
When you look at the two of them.
They look like they could be
Exactly.
siblings. But he plays Rooney's little brother in the musical Summer Holiday in 1948, which also starred Gloria DeHaven and Walter Houston and Frank Morgan. And then in 1948, he appears another movie I've seen that is wonderful. It's with Van Johnson and June Allison, and it's this romantic comedy called The Bride Goes Wild.
And he's kind of the sidekick to Van Johnson.
He is, and he's this little devious booger that just stirs up trouble for
My mother said never say that word.
booger.
Yes.
Oh no. It's interesting with Butch Jenkins because when he hit 11, he developed a stutter. Which he never had, and it was a stutter that would stay with him for the remainder of his life, and it really kind of dampened his career.
Of course.
His final performance was, again, with Margaret O'Brien in a movie called Big City in 1948, and after that he retired. He was done. But the truth was, he didn't really love being a child star, like a lot of them. He really didn't love it. He didn't want to do it long term, and he got out when the getting out was good, I guess.
Yeah. And his parents actually invested his money wisely, and so he was independently wealthy. But this whole topic really does make me wonder, what were the day-to-day lives like of these child stars in that era? Their lives were kind of signed away. I know they probably had school on set or with other kids that were under contract as well. But it's not a childhood.
No. I think a lot of these kids just wanted to be kids. I really
course.
do. And I think the smart ones knew when to get out. And
Yeah.
I think he did because he went on to be a very successful businessman. He had a really beautiful life with a family. He ended up moving to North Carolina and just had this idyllic later life. And Butch Jenkins, he left us on August 14th, 2001 in Asheville, North Carolina. It was just 2 weeks shy of his 64th birthday.
He died young.
He did. But
Well,
what
he-
a great child star he
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Adorable.
Yes.
All right, next we're going to be talking about a young actress named Marsha Mae Jones. And here's what I find amazing about her. She was discovered at 6 months old.
What was the competition like at 6 months?
I don't know. But I mean, when you look at her beautiful face, and she has so many memorable performances,
So
but those
many.
eyes, she is lovely. Tell us about her.
Again, she's just one of those actresses as a kid that just pulls you in with those cherub cheeks and those blonde curls and that little angel face.
And she looks like she could just cry on a dime.
Oh, you know it. Marsha Mae, she came from sort of a showbiz family. And her mother was sort of a stage mother. And Marsha Mae, since she got discovered at 6 months, sort of became the favorite. And the mother, everything was about Marsha Mae. So it caused a lot of jealousy.
Because she had older sisters.
She did.
And
She
they all wanted
had-
to be actresses.
But it was all about Marsha.
Oh, I think I've heard that.
Exactly. So it caused friction, because
Of course.
at one point, Marsha Mae was the main breadwinner for the family. So to put that kind of a pressure on a child, I can't even imagine.
And
what it
just
was
the
like.
whole sibling relationships had to have been strained.
Which is too bad.
Yeah.
But she was born in Los Angeles after she was discovered at 6 years old. And actually,
6 months.
I'm sorry, 6 months old. And she was discovered for the film Mannequin from 1936, which starred Joan Crawford and Spencer Tracy.
Oh.
But her first major role, it's a great movie called Night Nurse, 1931. It's a pre-code hospital drama starring Barbara Stanwyck, Clark Gable, and Joan Blondell. What a
We
cast.
love, yes.
And Jones plays a very integral part as this sick child who a sinister hospital staff member wants to murder for the insurance money.
Ooh.
I know. So
This is a creepy
It's a pretty dark
story,
dark
yeah.
subject matter. And she was really effective in that. I think it's what really boosted her career into bigger parts. But
Well, to follow that up with The Champ, right?
yeah, she's in The Champ with Wallace Beery and Jackie Cooper, which is an amazing movie from 1931, which they remade in the 70s with John Voight, which is so good. And that Ricky
it's
Schroeder.
so good. He was so good. I just remember bawling at that film.
Exactly. So by the time Marcia May is 10 years old, she's got 16 films under her belt. I think her career really rose to a new level in 1936 when William Wyler cast her in his film These Three, which of course was based on Lillian Hellman's play The Children's Hour, which was a controversial play that dealt with lesbianism. But of course,
that was totally taken out.
That was a no-go in the Hays Code operated Hollywood. So they changed it to this inappropriate love triangle instead of lesbianism.
I didn't realize that it had been made originally as These Three.
Yeah.
But then later, Audrey Hepburn
and Shirley MacLaine.
MacLaine play it in the 60s.
Yeah, but in this version, the inappropriate love triangle is between Meryl Oberon, Miriam Hopkins, and my man, Joel McCrea.
Mm-hmm.
Marcia May plays this very innocent, lovely, terrified child who is totally bullied and tormented by the evil child, Bonita Granville, who's the one who stirs up all the crap.
Yes, she's the one that brings
teachers.
up all the rumors.
Exactly. And so Bonita Granville actually got a Best Supporting Actress Oscar nomination for this role. But audiences fell in love with Marcia May. She was the light, Bonita was the dark. But it really, it put her into the stratosphere as a child actor. And, she went on to do even greater things. She was in The Garden of Allah in 1936 with Charles Boyer and Marlene Dietrich. She's in The Life of Emile Zola with Paul Muni and Gail Sondergaard, who
we've talked about
of
before.
Course, who won a Best Supporting Actress Oscar. So the next phase of Marcia May Jones's career included 2 films with Shirley Temple.
Yes, Heidi.
And these are 2 that I think everybody knows, because in one, she plays super, super sweet.
Yeah.
And the other, she's the devil.
Quite the range for any actor.
But the one that gets me is Heidi. She plays her little friend who Heidi comes to help out. And it's just a sensitive, heartbreaking performance that really won people over.
She's beautiful.
Then she did The Little Princess, where she plays this spoiled little biatch who Shirley Temple basically has to wait on hand and foot. And there's one scene, and I'll never forget it, where she takes ashes from the fireplace and she dumps them over Marcia May's head.
Yes. And isn't there a story about Shirley Temple? After she did the first take, she dumps the ashes on her and she comes up to the director, who is called cut, and says, I want to do it again.
I'm sure Marcia May loved that.
I'm sure she did.
And I'm sure Shirley had a blast doing that. But it's a great movie, and it really showed a lot of range for this young actress. She was almost cast as Becky Thatcher in the great 1938 version of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but she had a growing spurt. And so she got cast as the sister instead, and somebody else got the Becky Thatcher part, which is too bad. Now she's kind of grown into a young woman, and her career really changes. Yes, she's playing much more mature roles. She plays a friend of teen singing sensation Deanna Durbin in First Love in 1939. She's in a fun movie called Haunted House with Jackie Moran, who she co-starred with a lot. And then she also did a movie called Street Corner in 1948, which was a very controversial film, and it was about a young girl who gets pregnant on her prom night and ends up in the clutches of this sinister abortionist.
Wow. 1948. That's very cutting edge.
Cutting edge for that era, for sure. And then her final role is in a really lovely movie called The Daughter of Rosie O'Grady in 1950, where she plays the sister of June Haver and Debbie Reynolds. And she moved on to television. She did a lot of TV. She did The Buster Keaton Show and I Married Joan and George Burns and Gracie Allen Show. And then she went on to do later like Gomer Pyle, My Three Sons, and Cannon, The Streets of San Francisco.
Simon and Simon.
So she kept working.
Yeah.
And one of her great last small roles was in The Way We Were with Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford.
The photo that you had on your blog shows a photo from that film, and she was such a pretty young girl. She was a pretty young woman, and then she has grown into this beautiful kind of character actress.
And it's funny to see that picture because you can totally see that little cherub face in her.
You can.
Yeah. After her career slowed down, she had to deal with some demons. I mean, she ended up going through a period where she was an alcoholic, which she overcame. And I think that was brought on by the trauma of her second husband committed suicide. And he was Bill Davenport, who was a very prolific TV writer. He did Gilligan's Island, Mr. Ed, all your favorites growing up, All in the Family, The Jeffersons. And he was like the love of her life. And when he committed suicide, it really sent her into a dark spiral. But her final screen performance was a very small role in a 1984 TV movie called Hollywood's Most Sensational Mysteries, hosted by Ben Gazzara.
Aha.
What a way to go out with Mr. Gazzara.
Well, she had an amazing career.
She did, and she passed away September the 2nd, 2007. She passed away peacefully at the Motion Picture Home out in Woodland Hills.
Well, we have many more child stars we're going to be talking about, but first, let's reveal the question for this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
The question of the day, of course, is about child actors, and it's about one of the actors that we're not going to quite get to today, but you can read about her on the blog. It's Gigi Peru. I mean, she was a great child actress, but she later went on to become a drama teacher at a well-known Catholic school in Hollywood, Immaculate Heart, and she was the drama teacher to a very famous woman today. Who was the woman?
I know this one.
It's good.
All right, we'll be back with the answer and more after this.
All right, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first, another stop on the Hollywood tour. The annual Academy Awards, or Oscars, were first held in 1929. It was at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard. But back then, it wasn't anywhere near the spectacle that it is today. In fact, it was a cozy banquet for only about 250 people, and only 15 different awards were handed out that night. However, in true Hollywood fashion, even back then, there was an after party. And two more fun facts. The first Academy Awards to be televised didn't happen until March of 1953. And the first Oscars broadcast in color wasn't until 1966. And now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Before we jump back into child actors, Steve and I both just wanted to acknowledge and thank all of you for the emails and posting on YouTube. And
the support you guys have shown for our launch has been amazing.
It's just been so amazing. And we wanted to, in particular, just give a shout out to Andrew in Ontario.
Canada.
And yes, he's in Canada.
Not California.
And he wrote us and said, I just wanted to send you a note letting you know how much I love your new podcast. It's right up my alley. I heard your episode on Beechwood Canyon, and it resonated with me because my mother lived in the canyon for many years.
Isn't that wild?
Yes. He says, I think your podcast on Beechwood Canyon was great. He teaches U.S. history at the University of Waterloo in Ontario. And he goes on to say, I loved your stories about Peg Entwistle and Paul Kelly. Most of all, I really appreciated your and Nan's deep knowledge of Hollywood history. It's like being a fly on the wall listening to two wonderful raconteurs. I just love that.
Thank you, Andrew.
So much, Andrew. And
amazing.
Tell your friends.
Please.
Yeah.
And Andrew emailed us at info@frombeneaththehollywoodsign.com. So anybody else, if you have any questions or comments or just want to drop us a line, we'd love to hear from you.
All right, next up for child actors is, again, the pictures, the photos of these beautiful faces. This is Bob's Watson.
I know, and I love that it's Bob's.
I do too.
It's not Bob, it's Bob's, plural.
Now, he came from a family of a lot of actors, right?
Yes, I think there were 9 kids in that family, and they were all involved in entertainment.
That's amazing. And, you describe him so well. He's got these chubby cheeks, mischievous smile, and he has this every boy appeal. Every boy appeal.
And, which is, I think, was his moneymaker.
Yeah.
He was just the kid next door, the funny boy at school. You just loved him because he was so precocious and so adorable.
And he, again, ends up starring with major A-list actors.
Yes, he did. He made his screen debut when he was just 2 years old for Warner Brothers in a movie called Life Begins in 1932. It was a really pretty compelling look at a city's maternity ward. It stars Loretta Young, Eric Linden, and Glenda Farrell. That really kicked off his career, and he started appearing in some incredible movies throughout the 30s and 40s. He's in Showboat, the original, 1936 with Irene Dunn. He's in Mary of Scotland with Katharine Hepburn and Frederick March. Libeled Lady with Jean Harlow, William Powell, Myrna Loy, Spencer Tracy.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What a cast.
And in Old Chicago with Tyrone Power and Donna Michi and Alice Faye. I mean, yeah.
He played Mrs. O'Leary's son in that one.
Yeah.
It's all about the Chicago fire and the cow that kicks over the
the cow that
lantern.
kicks over. But what would you consider, is his next role really the one that just makes him just go skyrocket?
And I think it's what most people remember him from.
Mm-hmm.
It was Boys Town from 1938, which of course stars Spencer Tracy and Mickey Rooney. I think that left the biggest impression on moviegoers. He plays Pee-wee, who's this impressionable tyke who just idolizes bad boy Whitey March, who Mickey Rooney plays.
Yes.
And he just pulls on the heartstrings like you can't even imagine. He's sort of like the heart and soul of the film.
Yes.
He's so memorable in that. That same year, he appeared in Young Dr. Kildare, starring Lou Ayres and Lionel Barrymore, and he went on to appear in 2 more of those films as this boy.
Because of the success of Boys Town, he was cast in several important films.
Yes, he was. And one of them was, and it's actually the film that Walter Brennan won an Academy Award for. It's a movie called Kentucky in 1938, which is a really good movie. He has a really great part in that. And he followed that up with the story of Alexander Graham Bell, which I think a lot of people have seen that one.
Yeah.
With the great Don Amici and Loretta Young and Henry Fonda. He appears in Dodge City, the great Western with Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland and Ann Sheridan. At this point, he's A-list with great studios, great stars, great directors. His career is popping at 10.
And it's popping at 10, and he gets a nickname, right?
He does get a nickname. They end up calling him Crybaby because of his uncanny ability to cry on cue, which I'm sure was a great tool for a kid actor back then.
Oh, yeah. It's necessary, right?
Yeah. One of his next movies is probably my favorite, and it's On Borrowed Time from 1939. He was just terrific as Lionel Barrymore's orphan grandson who has to ward off death, played by Sir Cedric Hardwicke, from taking his grandfather away. So he tricks death by having him climb up a magical apple tree. It's a great story. It's a great sort of fable. It's really good, and he's so good in it.
After that, in the 40s, he appeared in a film called Wyoming with Wallace Beery and Anne Rutherford.
Our girl.
And another Boys Town sequel, Men of Boys Town, with Spencer Tracy and Mickey Rooney. But again, we find an actor who's starting to mature.
Yes.
He's getting into a more awkward age, and his career is kind of over.
Those teen years were brutal for child actors. You either made it into adulthood or you didn't. And unfortunately, Bob did not, for whatever reason.
I do love that you mentioned, though, that he was in one of my favorite horror films, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, in 1962.
It's a tiny little part. Yeah, you barely even notice him, but that was his big comeback, like 10 years later.
And then did he end up being on television as well?
He did. He had that 10 years off and sort of came back with Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. He hit TV pretty hard. He was in The Lucy Show and The Twilight Zone and Green Acres.
Oh, yes.
The Beverly Hillbillies, Lou Grant. He did a lot of TV, which is kind of where he ended his career. But besides being an actor, and I think this is where he probably found fulfillment and peace, he became a Methodist minister.
Good for him.
Yeah, which, he served his community for 30 years.
Oh,
and
wow.
Bob's passed away from prostate cancer on June 26th in 1999. He was 68 years old.
I wonder if his congregation called him Pastor Bob's.
Oh, I hope so.
I hope
Pastor
so,
Bob's.
too.
Oh.
So next up is an actress by the name of Edith Fellowes. Tell us about Edith.
I love Edith Fellowes. She was this kid. She had these big, expressive eyes and these heart-shaped lips. And she always seemed like this wise 45-year-old in a little kid's body. She was one of those.
That's kind of what you want in a child actor.
It is.
Right?
It's exactly what you want. Her playing so much older than her years, it made her natural for portraying orphans and plucky street urchins. And that's what was sort of her forte. She was equally adept, though, at playing sweet kids, but she could also play brats, and she had a really varied career in that respect. She got to play, both sides of it.
So did she start, was her first film Pennies from Heaven?
I don't think it was her first, but it was the most important one. It's the one that really launched her career. And Pennies from Heaven, it was 1936, and it starred the great Bing Crosby and Madge Evans, Donald Meek, another great character actor. And in it, Fellowes plays Patsy, who's this orphan girl living with her grandfather, where Crosby steps in. He tries to keep Patsy from being taken away from the grandfather and put in an orphanage. So the movie, it's funny, it's touching, and her performance is so phenomenal. She totally holds her own with Bing Crosby, which is no easy feat, I'm sure. And she just delivers some really genuinely moving moments in that film. And it's, I think, what really launched her into child stardom.
And, looking at her history that you've written about, her start, she was born with a disability and had trouble walking. She fell prey, or rather her family fell prey to a fake talent agent who stole all their money.
Yeah.
But she continued on.
She soldiered on. She was not going to be stopped. But it was a bumpy ride, I think, her beginnings in Hollywood. But she got her footing. And I think her talent just elevated her and caught the attention of people that were important. And it really got her started in films. She's in some really great early movies. She's in Huckleberry Finn in 1931. She's in Daddy Longlegs and also in 31 with Janet Gaynor, Warner Baxter. One of her early important roles, I would say it's important, she was in Jane Eyre in 1934, which of course it's based on the classic book by Charlotte Bronte.
Such a good movie.
And she was great in that. And, you know, the next year she lands this really plum role as Melvyn Douglas's bratty kid in She Married Her Boss, which also starred the great Claudette Colbert. And that movie was so popular, it really helped Fellowes land her first contract with Columbia Pictures, which was kind of unheard of for a kid to land like a 7-year contract.
I would think.
Because they're banking on this kid 7 years from now.
Yeah, and they don't know if, like you said with an earlier star, they don't know if they're going to have a growth spurt or...
Exactly. I think it spoke for her talent.
Yeah.
Columbia, they quickly put her to work. She played Walter Connolly's daughter in One Way Ticket in 1935. She's really good as Mary Astor's kid in And So They Were Married, which was in 1936. And she's also in Tugboat Princess, which is also 1936.
Okay.
She was great in that. It's her and this salty old sea captain. Really fun, which... kind of sounds inappropriate,
but I'm sure it was
family fun.
Yeah, family fun. And then she does a series of films as Polly Pepper, right?
Yes. I forgot about the Polly Pepper phase.
But there was a little bit of drama behind the scenes.
Oh, a lot of drama behind the scenes.
Yeah.
She became the center of this highly publicized custody battle because her mother left when she was a kid, and she was basically brought up by her grandmother.
Right.
Well, once Edith gets famous and starts making money, guess who shows up? Mamacita is back for a piece of the pie, I'm sure.
Right.
And so she sues for custody. She claims that the grandmother is abusing her, has abducted her. Yeah. And it becomes this really high-profile court case.
Okay.
And ultimately, in the end, the judge lets Edith decide who she wants to go with.
She ends up going with?
Of course, her grandmother, the woman who loved her and raised her and didn't walk out on her.
And the judge also orders that Fellowes' earnings be placed in a trust.
Yeah, which was key, especially in those days, because I think it was before the Jackie Coogan laws. So she probably got saved a lot of heartache by that judge's decision.
What was her transition into an adult as an actor?
Well, you know, she, like a lot of young stars, the transition was difficult for her. You know, she did make some movies as a young adult. She's in Music in My Heart with Rita Hayworth and Tony Martin. It was mixed results. I think she also was going through that awkward teen stage. And so her career really slowed down and didn't really sustain or carry her into adulthood. She also got married pretty young, and she married a really famous talent agent named Freddie Fields.
Yes, Freddie Fields.
I think a lot of people know Freddie Fields. I mean, he represented everybody. He was the man about town.
Right.
And they had a daughter. It was around this time that she tried Broadway. She went back to Broadway, and she appears in the Broadway play Louisiana Lady, but it wasn't successful. It didn't last long. So the 1950s, she kind of shifts into television a little bit. She did a Studio One in Hollywood and The Tales of Tomorrow, but not a lot. I think at that point in the early 50s, she suffered a nervous breakdown, which pretty much ended her career. It caused her to have debilitating stage fright, which really, it sidelined her career totally and kept her away from the camera for decades.
But then a guy named Rudy Venz turns her life story into a play and convinces her to star in it, right?
Yeah, which was, I'm sure that must have been so cathartic for her.
I bet it was.
To tell it, you know, all the drama.
And to get rid of the stage fright, to kind of overcome that.
And it worked.
Good
apparently.
for her.
You know, because she did, after that, she started doing a little more TV and a lot of fun shows that we knew from the 80s. She's in episodes of Simon and Simon and Scarecrow and Mrs. King.
Cagney and Lacey.
No, ER. A lot of good stuff. Finally, on June 26, 2011, Edith Fellowes passed away. She was 88 years old. She also passed away at the Motion Picture Home.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful it's there, and thank you, Mary Pickford, for starting that.
Yeah. I I love the fact that part of what your blog started as is highlighting people that we've forgotten.
Yes.
And the fact that we get to talk about these people that their careers and their lives can be remembered always.
Yeah, because they matter. These people matter, and they're so part of our history. They're so part of why we're doing what we do now in this industry. And it's important. It's important to remember these people. And thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
When I was doing research on Edith Fellowes, I had no earthly idea that she was the grandmother of a friend of mine.
Oh,
Is that insane?
Gosh, that is insane.
Yes, because Edith Fellowes and Freddie Fields, they had one daughter, and she was this lovely, wonderful actress named Kathy Fields. And I don't know if you know Kathy Fields, but she plays Gene Simmons' daughter in this incredibly underrated movie called The Happy Ending.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever seen it with John Forsythe and Shirley Jones. And there is one scene with Kathy Fields and Gene Simmons walking in a park that every actor should study.
Okay.
Because it's that good. And Kathy was an amazing actress. Kathy ended up marrying the great David Lander, who we all know as Squiggy from Laverne and Shirley.
Yes.
And David, and we're so fortunate, because, I have a web series called Break a Hip.
Yes, I love it.
Because of one of our producers, Mason McCulley, who knew this family, we got David to do a voiceover as this bird that appears throughout the show.
Is it a parakeet?
It's
I can't
a parakeet,
remember. Yeah.
and he's this companion of Christina Pickles, who's this sarcastic, snappy bird.
Delicious, Christina
and David
Pickles.
did the voiceover for us. But then David and Kathy had a daughter. Her name is Natalie Lander.
Okay.
And she's this amazing, beautiful actress, comedian in her own right.
Right.
So I had no idea that Natalie's grandmother was Edith Fellowes, and I love putting those pieces together.
Talk about serendipity. That is amazing.
Yeah. So once I figured this out, of course, I texted Natalie and I was like, why did you never tell me that your grandmother
How
was
could that
Edith?
never have come up?
Exactly.
You know what I do.
So
You know what I write.
I love moments like that in doing this.
That's wonderful. Well, right now, I think it's time to find out the answer to this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz. Steve.
Yes, and the question was, child actress Gigi Peru ended up teaching drama at a prestigious Catholic school in Hollywood. And who was her famous student? Nan, you know?
I think it was Meghan Markle.
It was. She ended up teaching Meghan Markle drama at Immaculate Heart School in Hollywood. And in fact, she was one of the guests who attended their wedding in 2018.
Well, I bet she has some stories.
Yes, I'm sure she does.
Well, that wraps up another episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And we'd like to invite you to please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, where you can see some photos that go along with the episodes. And the handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.
Easy as that. And also, as always, we'd love to hear from you. You can always email us any questions, comments, ideas. Please email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
Thanks for listening, everybody. That's this week's View.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Kubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review. And tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Kubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2023. All rights reserved. That's a wrap.